All right, thank you, Jonathan. And welcome all of you here. I would say particularly some of you have come from as far as the UK, which is kind of Europe. So that's far away, and we're really grateful that you actually crossed the pond for this. So this introduction, let me first start with this. So this is actually our agenda today. And the idea was to actually have a gathering and talk about physics more than anything else. We had a Stan event, Stan Fest, when Stan retired, or about when he retired 15 years ago. And I guess I wanted to avoid having a repeat of the same thing. So not everything in Stan's career is covered here. But I wanted to make sure the common theme is that I hope these are all talks that Stan would have enjoyed hearing about. And so that's how those were organized. Now, having said this introduction was supposed to be 5 minutes. And then I discovered a trove of old letters, papers, and documents, which I thought would be kind of fun to share. And so this talk grew a few minutes longer. And then yesterday, Jonathan pointed out that he also has to say something. And so the thing grew even, I mean, it's at this point, it's like, I think we'll be talking or showing stuff for like 15, 20 minutes. And Jonathan will morph from session chair to speaker. Also want to point out that there's actually two people who are supposed to talk here, and they did not come in the end for reasons which are outside of their control. Bill Foster, who's a representative in the House. Since there is a new Speaker of the House, they expect, he expected that he better be in Washington and not move away from there. And Yifang Wang, who actually was first my postdoc here, but then became a very good friend of Stan, and he is now director of IHET in China, in Beijing also. And essentially, developed the reactor program, oscillation program that was started on this side of the world to the modern sort of. I'll tell you more about this later. And so Yifang, I guess his visa was too complicated. He gave up. It's not that he didn't get it. He just gave up before trying. And I don't think there's any FBI types in here. But yes, if there are any FBI types. Indeed, Yifang started doing neutrino oscillations at reactors here and then exported it to China. And that's okay. In fundamental science, this is completely reasonable. And we compete for producing, to see who has the glory of producing the result, which then is told everybody worldwide. All right. So, and important. There is a photo we want to take for posterity just before lunch. So before lunch, try to behave and follow the instructions towards the place where the photo will be taken. All right, so here comes the little sort of historical note. So this comes from the various paperwork that is in Stan's file in our main office. And this is actually when Stan was hired as assistant professor in 1966. And Stan was actually in the group he was in the group of Louis Alvarez at LBL, or the radiation lab, as it was called somewhat incongruously those days. And let me just read some of this. There seems to be no way that I can avoid writing you a letter of recommendation concerning Dr. Stanley Wojcicki. So here he goes. As you know, Stanley is the #1 choice of my research group and me, and then he continues, lamenting the fact that the department chair, who was Bert Moyer, was actually in India, which in those days, I guess, was a long trip. So he was kind of out of touch, no email. And so Segre was filling in for Moyer. And Segre thought there were too many particle physicists in Berkeley already, and so he would not consider the idea of hiring Stan. But Alvarez really wanted to hire Stan. And so that's why also he was somewhat unhappy of having to write the letter advertising him elsewhere. In fact, it says that Bert Moyer assured me that as soon as he's going to be back, he will try to do his best to hire Stan at Berkeley. And luckily for us, that didn't work out apparently. And so he continues to say that Stan has been considered by many who knew him or his work to be one of the most outstanding young members of the physics community. And the place, that is LBL, as we call it now, actually LBNL, as we call it now, is just brighter and cheerier because of his presence. Now I wish I'd learned to keep my big mouth shut, since we're going to be very unhappy if someone like you gets Stanley away from Berkeley physics department. All right. This is really hard to read from where I am. Okay, I'm going to start here. Okay, so this is also another letter. This is now from Don Miller. And I'm going to read the entire thing, but there's a few things. His speed in comprehension, this is Stan, and breadth and depth were far beyond his contemporaries. And then actually there's something I'm using here. He does not enjoy idle conversation. That's good. But also has a remarkably stable personality. That's not a bad quality to have. Actually in those files, there's a number of photographs of Stan wearing a tie, which is, I've known him in the second phase of his career where he shed his tie almost permanently. For running shorts and less formal sort of attire. Anyway, this is the letter from the president of the university telling Stan that he was hired, or he had an offer, with an impressive salary of $9,000 a year. So that's all right. Then there's something about Stanford culture that I want to actually illustrate here. This is actually the file, there is a big, thick file when we hire somebody or we promote somebody that goes up the food chain all the way to the president and so on. And Persis, where's Persis? I've seen lots of those, I'm sure. And so this is the version, this 1966 version of this. And in the narrative, the department explains that they've been searching for this kind of person and so on, and they found him and whatever. And then they say, normally, we do not expect a beginning assistant professor to obtain full professor status. So that was actually in writing. In this case, however, the promise of such candidates, of the candidate is so great that the expectation is greater than normal. It's not very great, but it's greater than normal. But the more interesting thing is that, okay, so he's really great. And so then he started looking, presumably, for housing. And then he was told the university policy for assistant professors is that they become eligible only after they've served their first 3 years and they've been essentially. So you're out of luck. No housing for assistant professors. Okay, and so then Stan, had to, I guess, and Esther, here is Esther, came a few times down from Berkeley to actually look for a place to stay. And the good reassuring thing is that, so this policy definitely has changed in the last, 50, 60 years, but the distance between here and Berkeley is still the same. It's 100 miles round trip. All right. And then in 68, so actually there was a short period, the period between being hired as assistant professor and being tenured was apparently shorter. I didn't know this. And Alvarez at this point said, you're very wise to recommend Stan for promotion to associate professor, presumably with tenure. If you don't do it very soon, somebody else will take him. Okay, and then actually I found another interesting quote, letter from by Jim Cronin that says, I find him to be one of the most useful members of the, this is actually the old name of Fermilab, advisory committee. He has the ability to put his finger on the crucial points of each experiment under consideration, disregarding political aspects. Okay, and also for his promotion to full professor, there is a letter by Mel Schwartz. Let's see if I can quickly find, yes, okay. And Mel said, and Mel and Stan, as Jonathan will tell us in a minute, work very closely together for a while. And he says that in his opinion, Stan is the best experimental high energy physicist under age of 40. Indeed, there's only a handful of people over the age of 40, I would consider on par. And one is Telegdi, the other one is Steinberg, the other one is about Fish. Now, 2 out of 3 got a Nobel Prize in the field, so that was pretty lofty sort of company. Okay, and so then it goes on. I mean, I probably it's not point in reading this. You know, it says all sorts of nice things about Stan's ability as a scientist. And it concludes would be I would consider a great travesty upon justice and fairness were he not promoted at this time. Okay, so that's the end of my little introduction about Stan, and Jonathan will actually take over from here. So you say you don't want this, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the top is the fake laser pointer. This is the virtual laser pointer, and then you
as you said,
self-explanatory.
okay.